Now, look, I interviewed Elon Musk this morning just before he flew out of Russia. I told him that I'd always just seen him as Elon Musk's father. But the TED talk, or rather Fred talk, that he gave at a conference I was at in Moscow this week was mesmerizing. Musk Sr. was charismatic, informative, and above all, understandable on subjects that are not everybody's everyday breakfast. I started by asking him about longevity, which featured heavily in his talk. Here's what he had to say.
What I found was towards the end of last year and earlier this year, I had people approach me to talk about if I would be their front man for a longevity promotional series of I suppose television. I don't know where they put it. And I said, sure. So I went in, and at that time, I didn't really know what they meant. I'd heard the word longevity, of course. So I didn't really know what they were talking about. But since then, from South Africa, where that happened in Cape Town, to California, where I met another group of people doing exactly the same sort of thing, I learned what longevity means. It's a new study of humanity that came about because you can now map the human genome. You can now look at someone's DNA, and with machines that have been developed in countries like Germany, that will tell you from a simple 5-hour examination what this person is predisposed to in life in terms of illness or whatever. And it's quite extraordinary.
And then avoid the kind of behaviors that might bring those pre-existing problems.
Yes. So these longevity clinics are opening up all over the world. And the cost of doing these sort of tests, of course, were a few years ago prohibitively out of the question. But now, a professor from China was telling me $100 in China. I know it's $1,000 in San Francisco, and it is $2,000 in South Africa. So
still out of most people's range.
Yes, so 2,000 is way out of people's range. $1,000 maybe better. And but $100 in China, and the people in California were telling me it won't be long before it will be less than $100 in the US. So and people are advised to go start their longevity examinations at the age of 14. So I learned all this in the last few months.
It's amazing. I mean, you're a pretty good poster boy for it, because I was taken by one of the things you said in your talk, that you still fly airplanes.
Yes.
Although you added the caveat, albeit a bit more carefully.
Yeah, a bit more carefully than I used to.
Yeah. How does an 80-year-old get behind the joystick? That's amazing.
Well, flying an airplane is like riding a bicycle. So I've been flying for 54 years now, I suppose you could say. Yeah, 54 years. So I've had about 40 aircraft. So over the years, So you learn to fly. I managed to get my license in the prerequisite time and everything, but I wasn't what you'd call a natural or anything. I had to really work hard at it. And but as you fly, as you go on, it becomes a second nature, but a bit like flying, driving a car, riding a bicycle.
Now, it must be in the genes, because your son went on to be, in a way, the most famous spaceman since Gagarin. How did all that happen? What's the fascination with rockets?
Well, obviously, I grew up in the era of Sputnik.
Me too.
And
I still hear the Tornadoes number. Telstar,
yes,
and it makes me enormously nostalgic.
I can even sing that.
You and me both. Yeah. I tell my kids I like the next bit. just before the key change.
Yeah. Anyway, so I grew up in that era, and of course, we considered ourselves special and fortunate, and to be able to be in that particular era, which was, we just sort of grew with it. We just grew with it, and I was even on the Moonwatch team that the Americans employed local people in our country, I imagine everywhere, to map the movement of satellites, timing them and everything. Now, you got $1 a night in those days for most of the night, $1, which is a huge amount of money at the time, by the way.
Wow.
You could buy a jacket for $1, and so of course, when the children came along, obviously I, being an engineer myself, I would talk to them all the time about these sort of things, and they were very interested in it. So it was just a natural continuation. What happened with Elon, though, is he was not particularly into tech. He started off totally in the work. Well, he became very computer literate at a very young age, maybe 11, 12. But because I bought him a real computer from IBM at that time. But later on, he went on to do putting the newspapers onto the internet. Then he did PayPal. And after selling PayPal, he was at a bit of a loss as to what to do. And because all of a sudden they had PayPal bought out from underneath them for a large sum of money. And then to fill his time, he started flying, doing his twin engine rating. And at the same time, he saw that there was a sort of club in San Francisco called the Mars Society. So he went to a meeting of the Mars Society, and he was immediately taken by it and thrilled by it, and enthralled by it, that people were actually living, some had already been living for 3 or 4 months in sort of pretend Mars, sort of little houses
in the desert.
In the desert of California, pretending or practicing, let's say is a better word, to be on Mars. And they were seeing how much water they needed and how much food they needed and what they could grow in the environment there. So he was just taken up by this. He couldn't believe it. He was totally thrilled by this, so much so that within a week or so, he gave this little society $100,000, of his earnings from PayPal, and that really helped them get on the map as well. And then he immediately said, "I'm going to launch a rocket. I'm going to find a rocket." Came to Russia to see if he could buy one, because he had no idea what like me and you, we might do the same.
Where to start? Yeah.
Where to start? And he came here. I know that later on in recent years, the head of Rosmer,
the Russian Institute here.
Yes, the Russian Space Institute here said we sorry we didn't listen to him, but when he came and he said he wanted to buy a rocket from them, with the idea of sending something into space, they really thought he was off his head or something, Anyway, he then realized they're not going to help him. And I was living in Los Angeles at the time. He'd insisted that I come over to live with my family to come and live in Los Angeles. And so he told me he's rented a warehouse, and it was probably the worst possible warehouse in El Segundo that you could get. The lights were all falling out. The place was flooding. The floor was cracked. Electric wires were running all in the wrong places. Carpets tiles were missing. It was a mess. And I took on the job of trying to make the building better, and got a little team together. There were about 9 of us. I got a few Mexican helpers and everything. And we started putting this building back in shape. Today, that building, it looks like the interior. If you go inside, it's like a hospital intensive care unit, with enameled floors and all that sort of thing. And it was in fact used for making the film Iron Man as a set,
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where they do R&D at the moment for SpaceX, in that building, because now they've moved on to a large place which produces boosters in a continuous fashion like they used to produce Model T Fords,
Like a rocket road.
It's like an auto plant. They make them, they roll them out. They roll out the boosters, and they were making, up till recently, they're making 4 rocket engines a day.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, one of the mesmerizing parts of your talk was space-time travel.
Yes.
Everyone knows about space travel. Everyone knows about time travel. But you introduced a note of skepticism. Again, give us the 2-minute definition of that.
Okay, space-time travel is moving in the 4th dimension. So, although people don't realize it, I use the example of light. So when a photon of light leaves a star, we are told that it takes sometimes a few years or sometimes even 1,000,000 years to reach us. And it travels through space. This photon travels through space much like a little vehicle going through space. Well, that's not true. The photon travels in space-time. So there is no time and there is no space. It's a 4th dimension. So it leaves the star and arrives here instantaneously without losing any energy. It arrives here. It hasn't changed. It hasn't been bumping into anything on the way. The space is not entirely empty, by the way. And it reaches here without the elapse of time from the point of view of the photon. So that's traveling in space-time. Now, the 4th dimension. Now, Minkowski and mathematicians like him 100 years ago, Minkowski was the mathematician who put Einstein's theories into mathematics and into mathematical form. And he devoted his life after that, of his time with Einstein and with many other mathematicians, to understanding space-time travel and encouraging us 100 years ago that we must look at space-time travel as a means to reach the stars. To reach the stars. So if you were able to, in as much as people 200 years ago would not understand a cell phone, we at this point in time are somewhat unable to understand space-time travel, but we will understand it. And space-time travel, of course, is also tied up with gravity. So if you understand space-time travel, you would also be able to eliminate gravity from the things that are forcing you to stay on Earth. So, in fact, even in the production that you and your colleagues were produced for the Forum of the Future, where you showed the new cities that Russia hopes to build, I imagine, and then you showed in the videos on the screen vehicles moving slowly in the air around the city, but up in the air. That's just make-believe. But that's assuming you're saying to people, we have conquered gravity. Those vehicles are able to move without worrying about the weak gravitational force. And so we haven't done that. So that's just imagination at work. But in reality, we must find the solution to that, because we see it and we know, especially as an engineer, you know that in due course we will be doing that. And to do that, we need to start applying ourselves to study it more seriously than we are at the moment. So most universities and places around the world are still stuck in conventional studies, but we need to move to the study of these things that Minkowski and his colleagues were busy with 100 years ago. And luckily enough, Minkowski and his colleagues have left us a fine collection of papers on space-time travel. So it's available. It's not like we're starting from scratch. We actually have. And Minkowski maintained that the answers are written in math. So mathematicians, just as we found that energy and mass are the same thing, we found that out in mathematics. Through mathematics, we found that out. No other way. Before 1905, all the scientists in the world agreed that the sun is made of coal. No.
Yeah.
So if you went to a university prior to 1905, doesn't matter where you went, Heidelberg, Berlin, MIT, or wherever it was, you were told the sun is a huge ball of coal that's on fire. And that's why we get heat from it. I mean, it's preposterous now to think like that. But that's what people were taught, because there was no way that anyone could understand what else it could be. You understand? So along came this young man who got a second-class pass in physics, which was not enough to give him a position at a university as a lecturer. That's Einstein. And so he got a job at a patent office. We had lots of spare time, apparently. And he set about putting his ideas of relativity into what he could do in his in the level of ability he had at the time. And he came up with a 2-page essay paper, which was only 2 pages, the special law of relativity. And he sent it with a colleague of his. If you read the autobiographies, he sent it with a colleague to Heidelberg University because he didn't have money for postage. And when it got there, within 2 or 3 months, 2 months, all the universities in the world knew that the sun is actually energy and mass mass turning into energy. Hydrogen forming helium, and in the process releasing mass as energy.
And not a lump of coal.
And not a lump of coal. So that's just an example of what we didn't know.
Yeah.
And in the same way, space-time travel is something we don't know, but somebody, somewhere, some geeky hamburger munching, Coke drinking, Coca-Cola drinking nerd will tell us.
Now, we're in Moscow now, from where they first reached to the stars. Sputnik,
yes.
Gagarin,
Yes.
The failure to recognize the inherent ability of your son, Elon. How different life could have been if they'd taken Elon under their wing, and SpaceX could have been a Russian thing.
Yeah.
But they reached for the stars here first. And you said somewhat controversially in the English press, I wish I had said it, that Moscow is the finest capital city in the world.
Yes,
The problem for the newspapers is that is indisputably true, as anyone who's walked through these grand avenues already knows. Give us your reflections on.
Well, yes,
on Moscow.
I arrived in Moscow a week ago, as I was invited here, and of course an invitation I simply could not resist. And of course I had the media movie impression that Moscow is like dark alleys and sort of brick buildings that are very questionable, and dark windows and people in the shadows with long coats on and guns and knives and all that sort of stuff. So that's sort of in your head, and smelly and or something, or everything unpleasant, or sort of not unpleasant but spooky, And so I was quite amazed when I arrived in Moscow and drove in on the long drive from the airport to see what was, to my mind, the most beautiful city I've ever seen. And having now seen much more of it, I've seen a great deal of it now because I was on the river last night for a long trip. And of course, many, many other trips around on the cars, in vehicles around the city. This is by far, not by a little bit, this is by far the most beautiful capital city on earth. There's no question in my mind.
Not at all.
Not a iota of question about it. This is by far the most beautiful capital city on earth.
Yeah, this is something that more people need to know. And yet the vilification of Russia, the conference we were at, for example. Yeah. I didn't sign their declaration because there were some things in it that I couldn't put my name to. But it's described as far right.
Yes, that's ridiculous.
When they were proselytizing for more children.
Yes.
For a tackling of the demographic
living spaces.
Yes. Bigger houses for families.
Yes.
Free. And
how houses should be designed for families.
Yeah.
To make living easier.
It just shows how.
And how the populations need to be sustained properly, and Yeah, there was. I saw that far right. I thought, these people must be desperate. These media people to describe this as far right.
Well, it's now moved into the ether and therefore is everywhere forever. You and I will forever.
I don't think people are that stupid. I think these days, since 2015, before 2015, I was taken in by the media. I only started. I used to watch CNN. I can't believe it. It's just that around about 2015, I started to see things on, say, CNN, which didn't make any sense to me. I thought, well, that can't be right. And, common sense started to kick in and it's grown. But not only with me, but with many people. So it's not as though we are where we were. We are now in a world where certainly people are far more aware and informed about the issues, and particularly in the United States, where they really didn't give a hoot about it as long as they were making a good income, a good living. The people are now aware that they had a bad government, and they realize that now with Biden.
Yeah, and that the media lied to them.
Yes.
About it. You've got to fly. So last question. About 2 hours ago, Elon Musk expressed his regret at some of the tweets that he issued against President Trump. You approve of that?
Oh, yes, no, absolutely.
How do you explain what happened? It was almost a supernova of hatred.
No, I wouldn't say hatred. I would say irritation with the situation. Not hatred. I don't say hatred. No, look, they had a year, I was going to say maybe 3 or 4 months, but it's actually a year of intense involvement, trying to get rid of the opposition, which has now been scattered. The opposition is not only gone, it's scattered. It doesn't exist anymore. And the arena was finally cleared of all opposition, and it was just the two of them. And
almost like two men in one of these space pods.
Yes, that's right.
All the way to Mars.
Very good, very excellent, very, very good. You can't put 2 people in a space pod for 6 months, or 4 people would be even worse, and expect them all to come out on the other side alive. Believe me, I've done a lot of yachting. Taking 4 people across an ocean on a yacht, it takes a very, very good skipper, a very good captain to keep the order. Anyway, so. Yes, I think that having cleared the arena of everything except themselves, they were still in the mode of get rid. So they decided to get rid of each other. but that's what happens in all human relationships. Be it if you're a manager or if you're a committee member at a club. I've seen committee members at golf clubs want to kill each other and say, "I'm going to kill you," over some small change, if you know what I mean. So it's the stress that people build up, and that has to find an outlet somehow. In the years gone by, it was, "I'll meet you at 5 a.m. with swords or pistols." You know what I mean? Which was equally stupid. And so I don't think anybody should lose any sleep over it. I think that. These are 2 incredibly capable men, my son and Donald Trump. So we can look forward to good things.
You think the relationship can return safely back to us?
Well, I don't. I think Elon's done his job in government. I see them more. It depends on what comes up. He's not going to join with a suitcase or a briefcase and go into the office every day. That's not going to happen. But if a position of some sort or a task of some sort should show its face, he will very likely be called in.